Hi, Capricorn. Wow, the energy coming through your reading feels incredibly strong. Honestly, when I pulled these cards, I had to sit with them for a moment because something about this story feels different. There's a quiet realization unfolding here, the kind that doesn't happen overnight. It feels like someone has been trying very hard to focus on everything except this connection. Work, responsibilities, goals, the practical side of life. And yet, no matter how much they try to stay busy, they keep finding their way back to thoughts of you. Okay. If you've been feeling like something is shifting beneath the surface, you're not imagining it. Because what I'm seeing here isn't just nostalgia, it's deeper than that. It's the slow recognition of something they can no longer ignore. So take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's see where these cards want to take us today. Because the first card that immediately catches my attention is the Four of Pentacles. And this is interesting, because the energy I'm picking up from this person doesn't feel cold. It feels controlled. There's a difference. I keep hearing someone tell themselves, just stay focused, just keep moving, just keep working. Almost as if they've been trying to organize their life into neat little boxes. Responsibilities over here, career over there, goals, obligations, things that can be measured, things that make sense, things they can control. But feelings? Feelings don't always follow the plan. And I feel like that's exactly what has been happening. The harder they tried to keep their attention on everything else, the more this connection kept finding a way back into their thoughts. Then I see the Page of Swords. Wow, this card feels restless. It's almost like someone who keeps checking the same door even though they know nobody has knocked. Someone who keeps revisiting the same memory, the same conversation, the same face, the same connection. I don't necessarily feel that they're talking about you openly. Actually, I feel the opposite. This feels like a person who keeps a lot inside. A person who would rather analyze their emotions than express them. A person who has spent a long time convincing themselves that they were fine, that they were over it, that they had moved on. But every time they start believing that story, something happens. A song, a place, a random thought. And suddenly you're there again. Honestly, I think that's what surprises them the most. Not that they still think about you, but how often, how naturally, how deeply. Because I don't feel this energy coming from obsession. I feel it coming from significance. There is a difference. Some people leave memories. Some people leave an imprint. And what I'm seeing here is somebody slowly realizing that your presence left an imprint on their life. Then we have the Star. And the moment this card appeared, the energy softened. The pressure disappeared for a second. The defenses dropped. The constant need to stay busy became quieter. Because underneath all the thinking, underneath all the logic, underneath all the distractions, there is still a part of them that feels connected to you. A part they haven't fully understood yet. A part they may have tried to ignore. But it's still there. And I keep feeling that whenever life becomes overwhelming, whenever things become stressful or uncertain, their mind circles back to you. Not because you're physically there, but because your energy became associated with something they haven't been able to replace. Comfort, peace, understanding, the feeling of being seen. Okay, let's talk about the Six of Cups for a moment because this card completely changes the atmosphere of the reading. The moment it appeared, I felt nostalgia, not dramatic nostalgia. Not the kind that makes someone cry every day, more like those quiet moments. The moments nobody talks about. Driving somewhere and suddenly remembering something you said. Laughing at something and wishing they could tell you about it. Accomplishing something important and instinctively wondering what your reaction would have been. It's those little moments, the ones that sneak up unexpectedly. And I think that's where this realization is beginning. Not through grand gestures, not through some huge event, but through dozens of small moments that keep reminding them how much space you occupied in their world. Because the truth is, they thought this connection would become easier to forget. They thought time would naturally create distance. They thought they could simply move forward and focus on what was in front of them. Yet here they are, still thinking, still remembering, still carrying pieces of this connection with them. And the more they try to understand why, the more they begin to realize that maybe what they felt was much deeper than they originally allowed themselves to admit. And, wow, I feel like that's only the beginning of what these cards are trying to reveal. Because there is something else happening beneath the surface. Something they haven't fully faced yet. Something that is slowly asking them to look back at choices they once believed were the right ones. Because when the Five of Cups shows up here, the energy becomes much more personal, much quieter too. This doesn't feel like somebody blaming other people anymore. It feels like somebody sitting alone with their own thoughts. Somebody replaying moments they once rushed past. And, honestly, I think that's what makes this energy so uncomfortable for them. They're beginning to see things from a different angle. Not because somebody forced them to. Not because somebody gave them advice. Because life itself has been showing them certain truths they can no longer avoid. I keep getting this image of someone looking at old decisions and realizing that what felt safe wasn't necessarily what made them happy. What felt logical wasn't necessarily what fulfilled them. And that's a difficult realization, especially for somebody who has spent so much of their life trying to make the responsible choice, trying to make the practical choice, trying to make the choice that made sense on paper. The Five of Cups feels like the moment they begin questioning those choices, not dramatically, not all at once. Just little moments of awareness that keep showing up. Little moments that ask, what if? What if I had been more honest? What if I had stayed? What if fear made the decision instead of my heart? Wow, that question keeps coming through very strongly. Then we move into the Hermit. And this card feels deeply Capricorn to me, because I don't feel somebody running toward answers. I feel somebody withdrawing from the noise, pulling back, observing, thinking, trying to understand themselves. There's a distance between them and the outside world right now, not because they want to be alone forever, but because they are trying to hear their own voice again. And I think for a long time, they've been listening to everyone except themselves. Family expectations, responsibilities, obligations, the opinions of people who don't actually have to live their life. You know what I mean? Sometimes people become so focused on doing what is expected that they stop asking themselves what they truly want. The Hermit feels like they're finally asking that question. And the answer they're finding is not as simple as they expected, because every road they follow somehow circles back to this connection. Then judgment appears. Okay, this card feels powerful, not dramatic, not chaotic, just powerful. Because this is the point where awareness becomes impossible to ignore. Something is waking up inside this person. Something that has been sleeping for a very long time. I don't think they can tell themselves the old story anymore. The story that this connection didn't matter. The story that they could replace it. The story that they could simply move on and never look back. That story is falling apart, and the truth underneath it feels much stronger. The truth is that you changed something inside them. The truth is that your absence taught them things your presence never could. The truth is that losing access to this connection forced them to confront parts of themselves they weren't ready to face before. Honestly, I think that's where a lot of this regret is coming from. Not because they missed the past, because they're finally understanding it. And there is a huge difference. The Eight of Cups feels especially important here, because this doesn't feel like somebody walking away from you. It feels like somebody realizing they have been walking away from themselves. They've been carrying certain fears, certain old beliefs, certain emotional habits. And now they can see how those things influence their choices, how those things shape their behavior, how those things created distance where they actually wanted closeness. And the more they recognize it, the harder it becomes to pretend nothing happened. I keep feeling this pressure building beneath the surface. Like they're standing at the edge of a realization that could change everything. They're not fully there yet. Not completely. But they're getting closer. Because the cards are showing me someone who is no longer asking whether this connection mattered. They're starting to ask something much deeper. They're starting to wonder what kind of person they would need to become if they wanted a different outcome than the one they're living with now. Because the Death card arrives here and immediately changes the atmosphere. Not in a frightening way. Not in a dramatic way. It feels more like a door quietly closing behind someone after they've spent years standing in the same room. You know, I keep sensing exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, soul exhaustion. The kind that comes from carrying an old version of yourself for too long. And I think that's exactly where this person is. They're starting to realize that certain patterns cannot follow them into the future they want. Certain fears cannot come with them. Certain excuses cannot come with them. Certain versions of themselves cannot come with them. Wow. That feels incredibly significant. Because I don't think this transformation is happening because they suddenly became wiser overnight. Life has been teaching them, slowly, relentlessly. And every lesson seems to be pointing toward the same thing. Something has to change. Then the Tower appears. Okay, this feels like reality interrupting denial. That's the best way I can describe it. I keep seeing moments where things don't work the way they expected. Plans changing. Situations shifting. Certain structures in their life becoming unstable. Not because they're being punished. Honestly, it feels more like life removing distractions. Life stripping away things that were never built on solid ground to begin with. And when that happens, people are forced to see what remains. What is real? What actually matters? I think this person spent a long time believing they could outthink their emotions, outwork them, outrun them, stay busy enough to avoid them. But the tower doesn't seem interested in letting that happen anymore. Every time they try to return to the old version of themselves, something feels off, something no longer fits, and that can be deeply uncomfortable, because growth sounds beautiful when we're talking about it. Living through it is something completely different. The devil feels especially important in this story, because this card doesn't feel like another person. It feels internal. It feels like habits, beliefs, fears, old narratives. I keep hearing this voice saying, what if I get hurt? What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? What if things fall apart again? And honestly, I don't think these fears started with you. I think they existed long before this connection ever entered their life. This connection simply exposed them. That's why it feels so intense. Because when somebody truly matters, they illuminate parts of ourselves we've been hiding from. The devil feels like this person staring directly at those hidden places. Not running, not pretending, actually looking. And I think that's new. Very new. Because there was a time when they would rather distract themselves than face what was underneath. There was a time when staying comfortable felt safer than growing. There was a time when control felt safer than vulnerability. But something is shifting. Something is loosening. And the cards keep showing me that they know it. They may not have all the answers. They may not understand every step yet. But they know they're standing in the middle of a transition. Then temperance arrives and the energy becomes softer again, almost like taking a deep breath after a storm. I love this. Because it feels like the first moment where they stop fighting the process. Instead of asking, why is everything changing? They're beginning to ask, what is this change trying to teach me? That's a very different question, and a much more powerful one. I see somebody becoming more patient with themselves, more honest with themselves, more willing to admit that they don't have everything figured out. And that humility is creating space for something new, something healthier, something more authentic. They're learning that the future they're longing for cannot be built with the same mindset that created the past. They're learning that if they want a different outcome, they have to become a different version of themselves. Not fake, not perfect, just more honest, more aligned, more willing to choose what truly matters. And as this realization settles in, I keep feeling another shift approaching. Because the more they release what no longer fits, the more clearly they're beginning to see someone they once thought they already understood. Only now, they're seeing that person through completely different eyes. Because the moment the Queen of Pentacles appears, I feel a very different kind of emotion entering this story. Not longing, not confusion, not regret, respect. That's the word that keeps coming through, respect. I think this person spent a long time focusing on what was missing in their life, what needed fixing, what needed improving, what goal had not yet been reached. But now they're paying attention to something else. They're paying attention to who has consistently carried a certain energy throughout all of it. And somehow, every road keeps leading them back to you. The Queen of Pentacles feels like the moment they stop looking at you through the lens of emotion alone. They're starting to look at your character, your consistency, the way you show up, the way you keep moving forward even when life becomes difficult. Wow, I don't think they fully appreciated that before. Honestly, I think they noticed it. They admired it. But they didn't fully understand its value. Not until life started teaching them lessons of their own. Not until they experienced what instability feels like. Not until they began searching for something real. Because what I'm picking up here is somebody realizing that your value was never in grand gestures. It was in your presence, your reliability, your ability to create peace without demanding attention for it. And that's becoming impossible for them to ignore. Then the Empress arrives. Okay, this energy feels beautiful. Because suddenly, they aren't just seeing who you are. They're seeing what life feels like around you. That's very different. I keep sensing someone imagining possibilities, imagining conversations, imagining future experiences, imagining a version of life that feels softer, safer, more meaningful. You know, sometimes people enter our lives and make us feel excited. Other people enter our lives and make us feel at home. This person is beginning to understand which category you belong to, and I don't think they expected that realization. Because it's one thing to miss somebody. It's another thing entirely to recognize that they represent something you've been searching for all along. The Empress feels like they're becoming aware of that. They're realizing there was something nourishing about this connection, something that helped them grow, something that inspired them, something that made them want to become better without feeling pressured to change. That's rare. And I think they're finally starting to understand just how rare it is. Then we see the Ace of Cups. And wow, the energy shifts again. Because this doesn't feel intellectual anymore. This feels emotional, deeply emotional. I keep feeling a wall coming down. Not completely. Not all at once, but enough for them to finally admit certain truths to themselves. Truths they've been avoiding. Truths they've been rationalizing away. Truths they've been trying to organize into neat little boxes. The Ace of Cups feels like the moment the heart becomes louder than the mind. And that's a big deal for this person. Because I don't see somebody who naturally leads with emotion. I see somebody who usually needs evidence, logic, certainty. Yet something about this connection refuses to stay inside those boundaries. The feelings keep growing. The awareness keeps growing. The significance keeps growing. And the more they try to understand it, the more they realize this is not something temporary. This isn't passing curiosity. This isn't convenience. This isn't comfort born from familiarity. It's becoming something much deeper than that. Then the Lovers appears, and honestly, this card feels far more serious than romantic here, because what I feel is choice, a very important choice, the kind of choice that changes the direction of a person's life. This person is beginning to recognize that certain opportunities don't appear over and over again. Certain connections don't come along every year. Certain people leave a mark that cannot be duplicated. And they're looking at you differently because they're starting to understand that. They're no longer asking themselves whether this connection was meaningful. That question has already been answered. The real question forming beneath the surface now is what they're going to do about it. Because awareness creates responsibility. Once you see something clearly, it's difficult to pretend you don't. And I keep sensing this growing realization inside them that staying where they are may no longer be enough. Something is asking them to move, to choose, to step toward a future they've spent a long time observing from a distance. And from what these cards are showing me, that realization is becoming stronger with every passing day. Because the Knight of Pentacles feels like somebody who has finally stopped fantasizing about change and started preparing for it. And honestly, that feels important. Because there is a huge difference between wanting something and being willing to build something. I don't feel impulsive energy here at all. I don't feel somebody rushing in. I don't feel grand declarations. I don't feel dramatic promises. What I feel is preparation, careful preparation, the kind that happens quietly behind the scenes. I keep seeing somebody looking at different areas of their life and asking themselves difficult questions. What needs to be fixed? What needs more attention? What responsibilities have been ignored? What unfinished business still needs to be handled? Because for the first time, they're not only thinking about what they want, they're thinking about what they can actually offer. Wow, that feels incredibly mature. The Knight of Pentacles keeps showing me somebody who wants their actions to speak louder than their emotions. Somebody who understands that trust is not built in a single conversation. Trust is built through consistency, through showing up, through doing what you say you're going to do. And I think they're becoming very aware of that. They're realizing that if they want a different outcome, they have to become somebody capable of creating it. Then we move into the King of Pentacles.
Okay.
The energy here feels much stronger, much more grounded, because this person is beginning to think long-term. They're no longer looking at this connection through the lens of immediate emotions. They're asking bigger questions now. Questions about stability. Questions about commitment. Questions about the future. I keep feeling somebody imagining what life could actually look like if they stopped holding themselves back, not just for a week, not just for a month, years from now. And that's where things become very real. Because once somebody starts imagining a future, they also begin noticing everything standing between and that future. Responsibilities, obligations, fear, practical concerns. The King of Pentacles feels like someone taking inventory of all of it, not running away, not avoiding, facing it, piece by piece. Because they want to arrive differently this time. They don't want to arrive confused. They don't want to arrive half-ready. They don't want to arrive carrying the same unresolved issues. Honestly, I think they're tired of repeating old patterns. And that's why this energy feels so deliberate. Then suddenly, the Eight of Wands enters the reading and everything begins moving faster.
I wasn't expecting that.
Because the cards before this feel measured, careful, intentional. Yet the Eight of Wands feels like momentum. Like something that has been building internally for a very long time is beginning to reach a tipping point. You know, there comes a moment when thinking is no longer enough. There comes a moment when planning is no longer enough. There comes a moment when a person realizes they need to actually do something. I think they're approaching that moment. The pressure has been building quietly beneath the surface. Every realization, every lesson, every uncomfortable truth, every emotional breakthrough. It's all been leading somewhere, and now I keep sensing movement. Not necessarily visible movement yet, but internal movement. The kind that always happens before external action follows. The kind that changes a person's direction. Then the Chariot appears. And wow, this card feels incredibly powerful here, because this isn't just movement, it's decision. A real decision. The kind that requires courage. The kind that requires commitment. The kind that requires somebody to stop standing between two worlds. I keep feeling this energy of alignment. Mind, heart, actions, beginning to move toward this same destination. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but intentionally. This person is beginning to understand that waiting forever is also a choice. Doing nothing is also a choice. Remaining where they are is also a choice. And I don't think those choices feel comfortable anymore. Something inside them wants forward movement. Something inside them wants resolution. Something inside them wants to know what could happen if they finally stop observing life from a distance and start participating in it. Because the more these cards unfold, the more I feel a plan quietly taking shape. A conversation, a gesture, a step. Something tangible, something real. And whatever has been developing behind the scenes for all this time, it feels much closer to the surface than they are letting anyone know. Because the Ten of Pentacles feels like somebody who is no longer chasing moments. They're thinking about legacy. They're thinking about permanence. And that's a completely different energy. You know, there comes a point in life where excitement stops being enough. Chemistry stops being enough. Potential stops being enough. People begin asking deeper questions. Can I trust this? Can I build with this? Can this actually last? And honestly, that's exactly where I feel this person standing now. The things that once impressed them don't seem to carry the same weight anymore. The temporary distractions, the surface-level connections, the situations that looked good from the outside but lacked real substance underneath. I don't think those things satisfy them the way they once did. Something has changed. Something inside them has matured. The Ten of Pentacles feels like someone looking beyond the present moment and imagining what truly matters years down the road. Who they want beside them, who they can grow with, who feels like home after the excitement settles. And every time they follow that thought to its natural conclusion, somehow they arrive at you. Wow, that's a powerful realization. Because it isn't driven by fantasy, it's driven by clarity. Then the Four of Wands appears and the energy becomes surprisingly warm, almost peaceful. I keep feeling somebody imagining stability. Not perfection, just stability. A life where they no longer feel like they're constantly running, constantly proving, constantly searching. There is something about your energy that feels grounding to them now. And what's interesting is that I don't think they always saw it that way. There was a time when they were focused on other things, other priorities, other fears, other obligations. Yet the further they travel through this period of growth, the more they seem to appreciate what was quietly standing in front of them all along. The Four of Wands feels like the image of a future becoming clearer, not because somebody handed them answers, because experience taught them what truly matters. Okay, let's talk about the Hierophant, because this card feels incredibly important in this position. This isn't somebody thinking casually anymore. This isn't somebody entertaining possibilities. This feels like somebody contemplating commitment, real commitment, the kind that asks a person to show up fully, the kind that requires consistency, responsibility, integrity. I keep feeling somebody evaluating themselves very honestly, asking whether they're ready, asking whether they've grown enough, asking whether they can finally become the version of themselves that this connection deserves. And I don't think they would be asking those questions if this were just another relationship. This feels different. It feels significant. Significant enough to challenge them. Significant enough to inspire them. Significant enough to make them want more from themselves. The Hierophant feels like the moment somebody stops viewing love as a feeling and starts viewing it as a choice. A daily choice. A long-term choice. A meaningful choice. And that shift feels enormous. Then we arrive at the Ten of Cups. And wow, this card doesn't feel loud at all. It feels quiet. Almost like a deep exhale after a very long journey. I keep seeing somebody finally understanding what they've been searching for. Not through logic. Not through analysis. Not through other people's opinions. Through experience. Through loss. Through growth. Through every lesson that brought them here. The Ten of Cups feels like emotional certainty beginning to form. Not certainty about every detail. Not certainty about exactly how everything unfolds. Just certainty about what their heart wants. And I think that's what makes this so beautiful. Because the fear hasn't completely disappeared. The questions haven't completely disappeared. Life is still life. There are still practical realities. There are still unknowns ahead. Yet those things no longer seem powerful enough to silence what they're feeling. The cards keep showing me somebody moving closer and closer to a decision they've been approaching for a very long time. A decision that feels less like a sudden choice and more like the natural result of everything they've learned. Because after all of this growth, after all these realizations, after everything that has shifted inside them, the future no longer feels like a distant possibility. It feels like something waiting just beyond the next step. And from what I'm seeing here, they know that too. And honestly, that's what I keep seeing here. Not somebody becoming perfect, not somebody suddenly having all the answers, just somebody who has been changed by this journey in ways they never expected. Whether this connection unfolds exactly the way they hope or not, one thing feels very clear. They are no longer the same person who first walked away from these feelings. Something inside them has grown. Something inside them has awakened. And for many of you, that may be the very thing that changes what happens next. As always, take what resonates and leave what doesn't. Trust your own intuition above all else. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Your energy, your stories, and your presence here mean more than you know. If this reading found you at the right moment, then perhaps there was something here your heart needed to hear. Take good care of yourselves. Keep moving forward one step at a time, and remember, some of life's most meaningful chapters begin quietly, long before anyone else can see them. I'll see you in the next reading. Until then, Capricorn, take care. Bye for now.